Now, Matt Miller is not showing his face, and the reason he's telling us that he's not doing this is because of a bandwidth issue or possibly a connectivity issue. Now, we don't really think that actually having to, broadcast from Cairo, Egypt should be a problem, but he didn't want to take the chance. So, we're going to say, take it away from Matt, our colleague from Cairo.
Thanks. I just think that experience has shown from here that live video tends to be a bit of an issue. So I didn't want to push that bandwidth problem too hard. And it may not be from Cairo, it may just be from my house.
Okay, come on, I was playing it up.
I appreciate it. Anyway, what I wanted to bring you today was what I've been working on, which is a world called Nimr Gorp. And I call it a world brought to you by iteration because that's the core feature of my experience of trying to gamify my classroom. And I'll talk about that in some more detail as we go through here. I am Matthew Miller, and as Kay said, I work at Cairo, or in Cairo, at Cairo American College. One of the courses I teach, and the one that I'm gamifying, is Introduction to Computer Science. And I've been here for 2 years now. This is my second year really with a gamified classroom. I've played with the ideas a bit before this, but my adventure started about 2 years ago when I ran across the video that I forgot his name, the fellow at Bozeman Science who did a TED Talk about his gamified classroom. I'll get there in just a minute.
Okay, no problem.
I'm jumping ahead of myself.
Yeah, and I was going to say, since it's a programming class, it's all about iteration anyway, right?
That's part of where the idea came from.
Cool.
Yes. So cool that you picked that up. And iteration to me, I was thinking about this idea a lot last year, and what I came up with was that we circle back to the same things over and over again. But iteration, the key difference between just circling around is that you're also moving forward. And so you end up in this ever-growing spiral. You have to get back to where you started at a higher level, and in order to do that, you need feedback. And then you get this spiraling effect, and it just grows and grows. So the three keys to iteration, to me, are that you take really small steps, you take a lot of them, and you need feedback. And so that's what my journey into gamification has been about. To begin with, the first step that I took was the fellow up in the upper left corner is the TED Talk about his gamification. And I watched it, and I got really excited about it. But he didn't give enough details that I could actually do anything. He got me all excited because he showed these leaderboards and the leveling system that he had, but he didn't talk in detail at all about what he did in the classroom, just how he was scoring it and the effect on the kids. And I have to think, because he's a really well-known, really great teacher, I have to think he did more than just points and badges and a leaderboard. But he never went into details. And fortunately, right about that time, this great guy called Lee Sheldon published this book, The Multiplayer Classroom. And I found it while I was searching on gamification after this guy excited me about it. And I started reading, and that had the details, like we've been reading, that really got me going. So what I did the first time, the first year, I said, I'm going to take baby steps on this. I'm not going to go try to leap into this all at once, other than the fact that I want to frame it as a year-long game. That was my one big step. I don't want to do one unit. I don't want to do tiny bits of this. I want to do the whole year. But I'm going to start out with just a physical game. I'll do some dress-ups, thus the guys with the funny hats.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
How is he going to tie this in?
Yeah, and by dress-ups, what exactly did you do?
I dressed up in wizard hat some days.
Okay,
Cloak
cool.
when it got a little cooler. I didn't. I wanted to dress up as the dragon for the part where the dragon comes in and takes them away and puts them on a mountain and makes them do things, but I couldn't figure out a costume for that in time. So I just had giant dragon pictures and eye close-ups and interesting things on the projector for that bit. Initially, everything was physical. I had a big map on the wall that I filled in slowly as we explored the world. It was still based on worksheets. It was still group activities in the middle of the classroom, physically walking around. And they were telling me, the feedback was right away that this is much more interesting than sitting down at the computers all the time. So they liked that. The feedback from the administration was, the kids seem to be really engaged, but you still need to be documenting their progress.
Yes.
And what we use is Moodle. So
Okay.
I started working with Moodle and trying to frame it within the context of my my world, which I initially thought about doing a modern-day fantasy kind of, you're working in something like the CIA.
Nice.
I didn't get that one off the ground fast enough because I had to do too much research for it. That's going to be next year at this point. What I ended up falling back to, because I know it so well, is a fantasy world.
Yeah.
So in the world of Nimr Gorp, everything runs on spell energy, and spells or programs are what everything works on. But the spell energy has been corrupted somehow, and things are falling apart. So a lot of what the kids have to do to begin with is fix broken programs, which was a way to scaffold things and get them so they can start with something and not have to create it from scratch.
And we just had a comment that a space theme would be really cool, too.
That could be really fun. Yeah, you could go lots of places with this one.
Oh, yeah.
So after a little while, I thought, this is working really well, the kids are engaged, but I'm feeling like I'm all by myself. Both on the programming side, because this is the first year last year that I had taught a programming class, full year class, and on the gamification side. So I went out looking for people in the environment in both sides of this that I could work with and learn from. And I started picking up folks that I could learn from in the programming side, and then I started running into communities like EdWeb and the Gamification for Teachers, by Teachers Google group, and then eventually Inevitable Instructors and all kinds of other wonderful folks that I could learn from and interact with, and built a bit of community around it. And the one thing that I brought from that first year, the really big lesson that I learned, was keep looking up the mountain. There's a goal at the end, and you've got to go up. This applies to the teacher and the students. I found for the students, it's the counting up instead of counting down, because if you're standing at the top of the cliff, you start with everything and you look down at where you could land if you start losing points as we frame our usual grades. That's really scary. But if you look at it as a journey up the mountain, and every step you take takes you closer to that top, it becomes a much friendlier kind of feeling. And the students in my class fed back to me that that was true for them. When I came in, and I borrowed Lee Sheldon's line completely and walked in and said, "Good morning, everybody, you have an F. And you can level up." And the story that he tells, the reactions that his students had, was exactly the same in my classroom. There was a moment of panic, and then when I said, "And you can level up," there was a complete shift, and everybody went into that mode of, okay, bring it on. So it really changed the feeling. And I had to keep this mountain in mind as well, building it partly because of the small steps aspect. Keep the steps small going up the mountain so that it's not too much work all at once. But also just to keep it positive. I can see that mountain, that peak up there that I want to be at the top of. And sometimes it's really frustrating that I'm not there yet. And I got to remind myself I'm going up the side. I'm getting closer every time I change things. So the second year, I started saying, what are this? I've started, I'm on my small steps now. More steps that I can take. What else can I do here? And the big change that I made for the second year is to implement a engine. I was doing some other work unrelated to gamification in the Adobe Education Exchange. Mm-hmm. And I ran across a man who had built and was in the middle of enhancing a game engine based on top of WordPress, which I knew pretty well. It's called Game On. And so I got a copy of that and started working on it, and this is what I'm using this year. So you can see on my screen, this is a screenshot of Nimr Gorp as it exists right now. And you can see on my screen we have a stats window in the upper left. We've got this little fellow in the upper right corner is my avatar as Lore Master Relim in the game. And I get to put up announcements across the top for the players, and then they've got their maps that they can get into the game with. There's player tool menus, upper right corner here. It gives me a whole lot of structure for presenting my material, without very much work on my part, because it's just based in WordPress. It also gives me a stats board for the players, and again, the avatar bigger picture. They get to see where they are right now. Down here, they've got a list of all their quests that I've created for them, and these are status where they are in each of the quests. They can send me notes as the game master, and then there's a whole bunch of other features here, rewards and damage and badges they've earned, and they can go look at the full leaderboard for everybody. And I also have a overview as the teacher. This is my board that I get to see, and it tells me in a glance what level each student is at, whether they've moved into a particular area. I expect that they're in a different part as we move through the classes. It tells me how much experience they've accumulated, and then gold, honor. I don't use the damage and the minutes much, but there's a whole bunch of different ways I could use it. And then I can send them messages, and then up at the top I've got tools to manually correct things or give extra bonuses as we go through the game. And this is an example of one of my quests. I've highlighted several different areas. The yellow, green, and blue are not, or purple are not usually there.
Okay.
But I wanted to highlight some pieces of this. The yellow bit, I give them just a little bit of a reward in experience points when they first come across a new quest and when they accept it. Initially, they would come up and the green and the purple would not be visible. It would just say, accept this quest, a green button there. Although the rewards part is listed, so they know when they encounter a quest, how much is this quest going to be worth? And then they accept it, and this green portion opens up, and they get to see the instructions for what do they need to do for this quest. And the button at the bottom changed to complete. And when they finish it, they hit complete, and the green button or squares over here briefly appear to indicate in a kind of flashy way, you've accepted this quest, you've won this quest, you're done with this portion of the quest, and here's your reward. And then it opens up the purple section, which is mastery. And you'll notice mastery is substantially worth more than the previous portions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because, at least in my quests, the mastery ones tend to be either reflection pieces or they are application. Take what you've learned and now use it someplace else to validate that you really got it. And I really wanted to make that something that they opt into, not something that I require. But in order to encourage that, I also make that worth the most of the individual quest. The most of the reward goes into the mastery portion of it. So it's structured to encourage them to go through that. Whoops. I want to...
Matt, I have a couple questions just based on... I work for a public school system, and of course grades come into play, and I'm just wondering what's the relationship of these color codes that you have and the mastery and, you know, the various XP that they earn and how you've color coded them here and how that relates to a letter grade, or do you have to give a letter grade? And do you expect all your students to reach the mastery part, or is that something beyond? And if it is beyond, like, how does all that relate to grades?
In my classroom, I do have to give a letter grade. And I chatted with my administration about this extensively because I am in a private school. So I'm not restricted nearly as much as I think I would be in the public schools in the U.S. And I chatted with my administration quite a bit about it. And they were very supportive of my basic approach. While I was learning about gamification, I was also learning about the work of Dan Pink and internal versus external motivation. And I wanted to make this as much internally motivated as possible. And that's why I don't require mastery in most of the quests. I do require mastery early on in the year. There's a sequence they must go through that introduces them initially to the game world and how to work with the programming tools that we work with and that sort of thing. And they have to go through all of that. Mastery is required for each quest before they can move on to the next one. But once they're in... Is
there still some kind of an EOC, and of course exam, or, you know,
I'll get there. I'll get there. Kind of long-winded answer, sorry. So my administration was very supportive of the internal motivation part. And so my grades are completely divorced from performance in the game. What I studied with Dan Pink is that money, which in school translates directly into the grades, that's what we give people in return for their efforts, right, is not a motivating factor. It's in fact demotivating for anything that requires higher order thought or creativity, and above a certain point. So I said, here's how I'm going to grade you guys. I'm going to have an interview with you every 2 weeks. We're on a block schedule, so that means 5 classes. And I'm going to ask you 2 questions. The first question is, what is your grade? And the second question is, why? And the answers that you can give me for the first question are, I gave it my all, which is an A. I'm trying, I'm working on it, but I know I could do better than this, which is a B. I'm not trying very hard, which is a C. I'm wasting my time, which is a D. Or why are you here? Who are you? Which is an F. I've never had anybody choose D or F. And validly. I've not had anybody actually come in and behave at that level. I have had students choose a B and an A, and a couple of times over 2 years, I've had students choose grades that I thought were a bit inflated. And when they got to the Y part, we talked about it. And then I pulled up their player board on my side of it, and we discussed what they did, and we looked at their blog, which is one of the things they deal with for mastery. And they eventually, we came to an agreement. They either showed me, you just didn't see what I was doing, or they said, yeah, I guess I really am not working that hard, or whatever it was. I've also had students come up very consistently giving themselves Bs when I think they really should get an A. They're really working hard, doing well, making progress, and the same kind of conversation goes on. They're remarkably remarkably accurate, I think, in assessing themselves. Now, do I think this model would work in a public school? I do, because the guy who invented this is Mike Scotchko, and he's working in a public school in LA. And it works really well for him, too. So I think it can work, but you also have to have an administration that's willing to run this with you, because if they're not going to be supportive of your back on that, that's going to fail real quickly, I think. But that's how I do it.
And I was going to say, I was looking these things up as you were going, and here is a picture of Mike Scotchko. And I have it right there. And since it's on the internet, I'm going to assume that he has approved it, because it looked like he was enjoying himself. And I hope it'll come up, and it says, if you Google the Mac Lab, gamify your curriculum.
Yep.
But back to you, Matt.
Okay, so the other thing I wanted to do is just show you a bit of Nimr Gorp. So this is what the player side looks like if you're logged in. You can see no messages from admin right now, but this would turn red or green depending on the kind of message that you get from me. We've got the same progress bar here showing me that I have 455 of the 500 points that I need to get to the next level, and details about my particular status in the game at the moment. As Kay had talked about earlier for XP, I can hit my stats to get more detailed. And this is the entire detail of what quests that I have open. Each one of these gray bars in the middle shows me which status I'm at in the quest. So for this stocks per quest, I have just encountered the quest and accepted it. I haven't moved on to work on it at all. I have an inventory, things that I've purchased or been given, and there is a piece in the game that is been developed this year that I haven't used yet, where you can gift things that you have or sell them to other players. We're not using that part yet. Rewards I'm not using at all in minutes. But the badges, I have a few badges. As you move through the game in levels, you start out as a nooblet, and then you become a noob, and then eventually you'd be a noob lord, and so on up the game board. The top level is a lore master, and that's what the kids all want, absolutely. Some of them are motivated by getting those badge levels. Some of them really prefer the leaderboard, and they spend a lot of time looking at who has the most gold and who's got the most honor and who's got the most experience and so on. So it's all there for the kids who really are motivated by that sort of interaction. And then I've got my player tools, including the map case, which is how they navigate the world. I'll take a quick look at that. So this is the digital version of the big map that I had drawn on the board initially, and they start out in the city of Assab, and then something happens when they're doing their quests there, and they get bumped from the city down to this village in the south of Segol. And in Segol, there's various different things they can find to do. When you choose one of them, then it gives you links to those quests that I had talked about. And then, as they earn their gold in the game, There's an emporium that they can come in and get various different things. There's a part of the game that involves some cards, and they've got special cards that they can buy to enhance their abilities during that part of the game. There's also various different goods that they can get for the general game, and some of these, like Stealth Snacker and Invisible Entrance, have to do with class management. There's not usually food allowed in the classroom, and I have to take attendance. So Invisible Entrance lets you come into the class late for free, and the Stealth Snacker lets you eat next to the computer as long as you're careful. Some of them, like Sudden Intuition, have to do with the game, and they can get a hint from the game master about a particular puzzle or something they're working on, unrelated to an actual spell or program. This would be a general logic problem that they're stuck on.
So Matt, I have a quick question. So now that you've brought up hints within the game or the gamification system, so we are curious. So in your classroom, did you see any sort of collaboration or work among the students, especially as they got stuck or they were comparing their own performances against their peers, if that was any motivation for the students?
Constantly. I let them know early on, actually as part of the introduction sequence that they have to go through, that they're encouraged to work together. And
is there any incentive or reward for doing that within the classroom?
I tried that the first year. I actually had a set of badges that I awarded related to what I saw for collaborating going on. And the reactions the students had in my class were not terribly positive. They were, at best, they were just a meh. That doesn't really float anybody's boat. And a couple of times I gave a reward for something that I saw, and they kind of looked like they didn't like that I had done that. They were much more motivated by actually helping their peers, and just the peer getting it and moving forward on the quest was enough to be all the reward that they wanted. So I've pulled back completely from giving those sorts of buffs and or rewards of any kind related to helping your peers out.
Interesting, but I guess if we think about what happens in actual games themselves, I think that logic is true. You see a lot of people who go onto the forums and post things and answer questions that other players have posted without any tangible rewards attached to it. So I think it's you see that translation between the games and what you do in the classroom.
Yeah. And it's very contrary to a very traditional classroom. We don't call that collaboration, we call it cheating usually, right?
Oh, yeah. And in online learning, right now the methodology for discussions are usually do an original post and then make sure you respond to 2 or 3 other people. Rather than just having them do that, we make it a requirement.
Yeah, which feels so artificial to me. I don't like that feeling at all. I think if we can make it engaging to be involved in what's going on, we don't have to do that. And that's what I have found here. Programming itself, the class is a self-selection, hugely self-selection bias here, because nobody takes it who isn't already interested in doing it. So in that sense, I have a very nice scenario. I'm excited because next year I get to do a required class, and it has
what class?
It's design technology from the IB curriculum, and it's also, because of it's coming from the IB, it's externally moderated. So I get to experiment with some of it won't be fully gamified, but it will be more along this line than a traditional classroom is. So I'll be curious to see how these play out in a more traditional core area class with requirements and external moderation.
And I think Tanya had a question for you too.
I was just kind of curious about the male-female ratio in your classes, because these are programming classes, and of course there's a lot of press right now about the lack of females in these kinds of courses.
I don't have any girls at all. For the 2 years I've done this, I know. I have had girls come in to the after-school club, and the first year that was very tentative. And the only ones that came in were from middle school. The second year, this year, I've had a couple from 9th grade come in, and I'm hoping that we just sent out our registration forms for next year, and I'll get to come back and see those in a couple weeks and see who's signed up. I'm really hoping I get some girls next year because it will balance the classroom a little bit. But right now I don't have any.
Matt, I remember from when I was in Cairo at that school a long, long time ago, the demographic there is very international, and you also have a lot of, there's a lot of Egyptian kids, other foreign kids, not just Americans, correct?
That's true. We have a very mixed group.
And your students are gamers, I'm assuming, or are they? Or do you know?
I know for sure.
Yeah.
Several of them, it actually became a bit of an issue, and we had to have a discussion about it, because they pull up, as soon as they come in my classroom, they get to their computers, they sit down, they pull up the Nimr Gorp and figure out what their next step is, and get started on that. And next to that, they pull up a online live stream, and I initially didn't really pay much attention because they were engaged, they were working. And then I started asking, what is this that you're watching? And it's a live stream of one of the big multiplayer online games, and it's the professionals, the kids in China or India, and that's stereotyping a little bit, but that's who I see on the screen is the Chinese and Indian kids, and they've told me that's where they're coming from, because it's getting toward evening as we're getting into class most of the time, and they're playing these games live, and so they're trying to keep up with what's going on, and occasionally I'll have to walk over to somebody's shoulder and tap and say, which of the windows on your screen is occupying most of your attention?
And what I was going to say is, yeah, second screening, it happens all the time, and it's really interesting because you do also have to wonder about at the workplace, will they be able to second screen? I mean, and don't laugh, I second screen all the time. And it's usually like there's some webinar going on that I can watch, and then at the same time, but I have to answer the emails, and we multitask a lot.
Well, I wouldn't say you're multitasking, and this is actually part of what we discussed. Humans don't generally multitask. We switch task.
Yes.
And that actually slows our brains down, and it makes it more difficult. But for some of them, and for a couple of the kids, looked at that and evaluated it based on what they were doing in the game and decided, you know what, I'm actually going to choose not to do that anymore because this is distracting. I actually really notice. That's it, Chris. I think StarCraft is the one they were watching. There are others who really, really are comfortable with it and can tune out visually. I can't do this. I'm one of the ones that has to have a single screen. I have to single task. Absolutely. But they can have that visual activity on their screen, and it's just a comforting little thing on the side. There's no sound related to it. and they're focused on the coding. And I know they're focused on the coding because they're constantly, throughout the class, asking questions of each other as I wander around and listen. They're asking me questions. I'm stuck here, Mr. Miller. What is the... I think I've got this right. What am I doing wrong? How did I make this call to the database that is just not working? They're engaged with the code side of it. So it was an interesting discussion to have with the kids to say, think about what your style is and how you're doing this. If you're distracted by that and it actually slows you down, is it worth having on your screen even though you enjoy it right now? And to their credit, a lot of them really thought about it. And there's a couple that I think really shouldn't be watching it, and those are the guys that I walk around and tap their shoulders once in a while. But they're not. I'm waiting for them to evaluate it to that point and let them work on it.
And I mean, yeah, I will tell you, we hear that a lot about when we're doing these kind of webinars. Like, how can you be talking and reading the questions on the side and responding to people? And I actually went to one of our communication professors to ask her about, well, how can people focus and then talk and then think, and she said, and she absolutely said it's task switching, and it can be learned.
Mm-hmm. I think that's true, because I've done that as you just described. I do it while I'm in a Hangout or watching a presentation or participating in something online. But when I'm actually working, and programming in particular, I think it's problematic, because when you get to a higher level of programming, and I think this would be true for math or history, I'm not sure about English, but I'm pretty sure for math and history it would be very similar. Basic level, not too bad to task switch. But when you get involved with a bigger program, or when you're evaluating something within the context of a section of history, or when you're really looking at math not from a solving an equation standpoint, but from a building structures mentally with math, you have to hold so many different things in mind at the same time. It becomes a real issue to add one more thing to your inputs. Sometimes I'll actually close my eyes just to eliminate the visual input so that I can concentrate on that. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say what's interesting is that how a lot of your kids are actually modeling what I've seen in the industry for programmers is that they have those fun areas, they have those loud areas, they have those different things, but a lot of the larger companies that have the funds to do that, it's very segmented. There's like an active space where they can collaborate and move around, and they do a lot of the second screening and different things like that. But then they also have their little cave. They get back to when they need to really focus. But a lot of our programmers that I've met and talked to, all of them have music going. They all have their own sort of environment they create. A lot of them have the little little action figures and things like that they play with, little stress toys, all the other stuff. To sort of help them keep concentrated, but then give them the diversions, and then go right back on task.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens in my classroom. I've got some kids that come in, they put in their earbuds, they sit down on the couch in the corner, and sit in front of their laptop, and that's their cave. Mm-hmm. That's their cave space. And then I've got others that want to do it collaboratively, and they're over in the general pit area, and they sit down in groups of 3 or 4 right next to each other so that they can all lean over to each other's computers and look at stuff. Building games, they want to work together. Mm-hmm. Solving individual problems in the game, they might want to work on their own, and it varies for different people at different rates. It's really interesting to watch.
Well, and it's really cool that you're able to provide that flexibility in your classroom as well, in the space as well. So that's really cool.
Feel very fortunate about that. So that's pretty much everything that I had related to showing off Nimr Gorp. Are there any other questions about that?
Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm just wondering, when before you gamified your classroom, how well did your students do in your EOCs or whatever measure you used to determine that they had indeed learned how to program? I guess you could have the artifact itself, the program, but whatever it was that you used to measure them before game and after game, did you see a difference in their performance, a difference in how well they did perform?
Not on the general exam in terms of how well do they learn programming. The tests we've based off of the American, American Computer Science Professional Teachers, American Computer Science Teachers Standards, and multiple choice, short essay, write some code kind of things. Performance has been very similar. Mm-hmm. What I have found different is the classroom management and how far the kids go. So I don't have almost any classroom management issues anymore. I occasionally have to walk around, tap on a shoulder and say, which part of your screen are you looking at? I'll occasionally have to talk to somebody in one of the one-on-one meetings every 2 weeks and say, are you really progressing as fast as you could be going? You were doing faster at the beginning of the year, or one of those kind of conversations. But in terms of, would you guys pay attention, please? In terms of, would you work together in groups? Anything like that has completely disappeared. I don't manage the classroom in that sense anymore at all.
Mm-hmm. How about their products? Are their products better, the same?
They're the same in terms of how sophisticated they are and how well programmed they are. What's changed is that level is reached at the end of the third quarter instead of the fourth quarter. Mm. So in the gamified version, we got through the same amount of material that I had taught in a year before in 3 quarters. And the last quarter, I open it up and say, we actually just had this conversation because we're going to go into spring break in a week and switch over to fourth quarter. What do you want to learn now? And they can open up and pick another language to learn. We've got Arduino kits they can break out and start doing electronics with it or robotics. And what the majority of them this year have chosen is they're working in Unity, which is a programming game engine.
Yep.
And I'm sure some of you are familiar with it.
Yeah.
And they are super motivated to get into this and build their own game. Mm-hmm. They fully believe that in a month and a half they're going to have a working game.
They'll have something.
We'll see. They'll definitely have something. But I'm excited to have them do this because it is perfect transference. We will switch to a completely different engine that I am not familiar with, mm-hmm. and they'll get to start working, and I'll get to help them troubleshoot and say, that sounds like you need some extra looping going on here so you can test this and this and this. How do you put that in here? So we're going to have a lot of fun. But that's the big difference that we've ended up with is we go through things faster.
That seems really powerful to me because, I'm always hearing from teachers, we don't have time to get through the curriculum. We don't have time, we don't have time, we don't have time. And so that seems like a really powerful reason for teachers to take a look at this.
It could be. I don't know if this would be true everywhere.
Yeah.
Again, I've got a self-selected group. I'm in a private school. I don't know how applicable my experience is, but if it could be replicated, it would be very powerful.
I feel like I've heard it before.
Is this a high school?
Yes, it's a K-12.
Okay, you addressed the administration and how they reacted and, supported and wanted certain things from you. What about the parents? How did they feel about your different kinds of strategies? It's not the way they learned.
No, and actually I haven't heard that line from anybody. I did on Nimr Gorp. I did immediately when I built it. I put up a page for parents and another one for teachers who want to see what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. And the parents page, I specifically talk about the learning theories that this is based on, where it is situated within the greater realm of pedagogy that I could be using. And I also specifically talk about Dan Pink and the autonomy, mastery, and purpose, and the internal motivation and that. And I give them a tour of it during parent orientation night when we invite them in for back to school, and we talk about it when the parents come in and we do the parent-teacher conferences. The reaction has universally been positive to it. Some of them are just, well, that sounds interesting. I hope my son has a great time in your class. And some of them say, I've never had my son come home as a teenager and tell me about his class. So the engagement level seems to balance out the this is not what I'm used to reaction. And again, this being a private school and this being an elective class, I don't know if I get more leeway because of that. I might have a different reaction if I was doing math and I wasn't saying you have to get through this entire curriculum in a year. Mm-hmm. They do anyway because they're motivated to, but if I'm not saying that, I don't know if I'd get a different reaction, but so far it's been positive.
Thank you.
Can I just jump back to that issue of completing work more quickly? It was in the first case history in the multiplayer classroom, and they talked about that they are getting through more work more quickly. Now, I just found it and then I lost it again. But I knew I had heard that somewhere else before, that wasn't the first time I'd heard someone mentioning that students were progressing more quickly.
Yeah, I think with internal motivation, it becomes a real different story. I read about a school in the eastern area of the United States. This is called the Sudbury method, where they don't have teachers per se at all. The students just choose what they want. And they do what looks like play for 12 years. And as they grow, almost universally, they decide that they need to learn math at some point. And they will learn 12 years of math in a year or two, according to the stories that I've read about this school. So that internal motivation really changes things when it's allowed to work.
Well, Matt, you really have to... Oh, you have something else, Trish?
Yeah, a lot of what you're seeing in American schools right now is something called the personalized learning model, where using blended learning and flipped learning, students are more self-directed, which the whole multiplayer idea plays into, because you're the one who controls how fast you move along, and you move on to the next level once you've achieved mastery. Well, even though he doesn't test for mastery, it is built into his quest missions and everything. So something like this would tie in with the personalized learning, which is what a lot of public schools are turning to right now.
Yeah, because you can customize everybody's path. They're rarely at the same spot at the same time. That's actually one of the things that I'm building in for next year, is a lot more variety in the quest options. So it can be very, very differentiated, and everybody can pick what they want. Because I'm hoping to get girls in the class, and I'll be able to tell on my roster how much of this I need to focus on. And I know from studying gamification that there tends to be a stronger desire for more social and less competitive pieces with the girls. I want to build more of those type of quests and more of those type of options for bigger multi-quest threads into the game for next year. That can become a really powerful tool.
Okay, Matt. Grid asked if you could go ahead and share the URLs, and if you do, we'll go ahead and put them up on the Google site also when this is over with, because I think people are really going to want to see that.
You bet.
And thank you very much, and we hope you'll stick around with what will now be our quiz.